Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Okay, so I am reviewing the Allen vs. Farrow docuseries that premiered on HBO like a few weeks ago. So I'm just gonna jump right into it because there's so much to talk about. Okay, so I was very intrigued about this docuseries because I've heard a lot about Woody Allen's indiscretions, but I never really knew what happened because obviously by the time it happened, I wasn't even born yet. So I had no reference point of what the situation was. I had heard that he married his daughter or something like that, and I was like, what? But I didn't really think much about it because I didn't know the full story, and I didn't care to know the full story, not because I was a defender of Woody's, but just because I wasn't a huge fan of his movies. I really didn't care about him in particular. There are many people who do. There are many actors and directors who I love who have worked with him after all of these allegations and stuff had already come out. So, and also the social climate has changed so much from the 90s when all this stuff occurred to today. However, I still wonder how this man was allowed to have a career. Who greenlit him to keep on making movies after everything happened with his family? And then also, why were people still defending him? And why are people, agreeing to work with him and just pretending oh yeah, we don't know the fullness of what happened, so we're not gonna get into it. We get a chance to work with Woody Allen. How amazing. And I think that's a lot of the mindset that went into some of these people just agreeing blindly to just work with him because he is such a celebrated filmmaker and actor and writer. Woody Allen was already a very high profile, sought after director, filmmaker. He made Annie Hall and he made Manhattan and he made a couple of other films that I don't remember, but those are the major ones, back in the 70s. He meets Mia Farrow, another very talented actress. She was in Rosemary's Baby. That's the main thing I know her from, and she was in Woody's movies after they started a relationship. Now, here's the thing. Mia Farrow had already been married twice, and she already had her biological children and also her adopted children. She has 11 kids, I think, at this point. And when they got together, Woody already knew that she had all of these children. His, I guess, understanding of it would be that you can have your kids, but I'm not going to be involved in that. We can be together, but I'm not involved with your children. That's your thing. He had his apartment in Manhattan that he used to live in. At first, you kind of hear just the basic premise of their relationship and stuff. It was unconventional in the sense of that they never got married, but they were together for 12 years. And they did have a child together, and then he also adopted 2 of her other children. So that she had also adopted. Yeah, so she adopted them and then he adopted those kids. So it was kind of unconventional because they didn't live together ever. She had her home in Connecticut. He had his apartment in Manhattan. They would go on to spend a lot of time together, and he did eventually, get integrated in the family and become a father figure to those kids. Even the kids who already had dads, he was there all the time and people looked up to him. Well, the kids look up to him as a father figure. Dylan Farrow came out in 2014 and said that he had sexually abused her. And he obviously denied that, and her story was kind of shoved. It was out there, but no one really talked about it that much. It did cause kind of a controversy, but because no one because he vehemently denied it, and because everyone else in the Hollywood arena had his back, it was squashed and it was put under the table, and everyone moved on with their lives. In 2018, after the whole Harvey Weinstein thing and the Time's Up movement and the Me Too movement happened, Dylan again brought those allegations back into the public arena. And yeah, because of the social climate at the time, people were much more receptive to hearing her story, and so it was able to get out there in the the fullness of what it needed to be, versus just like a little, you know, story that was like shoved in a column of some newspaper. Like it was presented as it should have been, like a very, like, this is a serious thing that's going on. And he did get some repercussions from that. Mia Farrow had a lot of children who she loved a lot. She actually like dedicated her life to like just being a mother to these kids, a lot of whom like who had like health issues and who came from really disparaging and scary backgrounds, and like she like took them out of those situations and helped them raise them in a nice family, with comfort and like, you know, just general goodness, you know, just a good, nice childhood in life to live. And she was made to seem as this crazy, scorned woman who just wanted to take her kids back from Woody and basically discredit him and ruin his life. How the story plays out is that Woody was really controlling, and he just basically told Mia that like he was the only person who was employing her because she was old or something. Like she was in her 30s, but okay. And that being in his movies was like a gift because, you know, she couldn't get employed anywhere else because I guess once you turn 30 in Hollywood, you're like non-existent. I don't know. She depended on him for a lot, and he took advantage of that dependence and the fact that she seems like a very like person who needs a lot of reassurance and who probably didn't have like that much confidence and stuff, and so she like banked her whole life with Woody, and she like put everything into that relationship. Adopted a baby girl who is Dylan, and Woody was like suspiciously obsessed with her. Like I guess that's like the only way I can put that, is like he was very, very into her in a way that's it went beyond the borders of like being a loving father. It was like creepy. I think the fact that he was having these type of weird behaviors where he would like isolate Dylan from the rest of the kids and put his head in her lap, like in her crotch without her underwear on. I don't know how he didn't see that that was inappropriate and weird, but Mia saw it, other people saw it, and she told him to go get therapy and stuff, and he went to go get therapy, and the therapist was like, oh, he's not used to being around kids, so he just doesn't know. And he'll try harder next time to not be so weird. Like, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but you get what I'm saying. It's the part where we know Woody has these weird behaviors. We know that he's very controlling over Mia and who she can see and who she can't see, and her career. Like, she literally they share the same agent, so she doesn't have anywhere else to go. Like, she is his. We get into the assault where basically the family was told that he can't be alone with that child. He can't be alone with Dylan because he has some really weird things going on, right? And so the nannies and all the people who work in the household are told, like, make sure you have your eyes on all the kids at all times. So the kids are outside playing, and one of the nannies comes in and she doesn't see Dylan. So she goes and she tries to find Dylan, and then she finds Dylan in this room, this TV room, with Woody's head in her lap again, which is like, why are you doing that? And then there's a moment where like it's like 20 minutes pass and no one knows where they are. Like, they're just gone. So Mia asks Dylan what happened. And then Dylan tells her that Woody takes her up to the attic and sexually assaults her. I'm not going to get into the details of it because it's so gross and awful. If you want to know what happened, you can watch the documentary. What's worse is that he says, oh, I have to do this. And when I heard that, I was like, ew, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean you have to do it? It's just so, it's so awful. The rest of the docuseries just recounts the trial and stuff of Mia didn't even want to bring charges to Woody. She wanted to work it out internally, but she brought Dylan to the doctor, and Dylan had to kind of talk about what happened, and the doctor had to report what happened, which is why the charges were brought up in the first place. So, and then at this time, forgot this piece because there's so much mess going on. Mia, I think before the Dylan situation happened, she goes into Woody's apartment and finds naked pictures of her adopted daughter, Soon-Yi, in his apartment, and subsequently finds out that Soon-Yi and Woody have been having an affair. I was born in the 90s, grew up in the early 2000s, so I can't speak to like what the general mindset could have been, but the way that this rolled out was like, oh, Mia Farrow's upset because her daughter and Woody are having an affair, and she's mad about the fact that that happened and that she feels betrayed, and so she's making up a story and coaching her daughter to say that she's been sexually abused to bring Woody down. And from the clips that I saw, it's not like, it feels like people like either didn't want to ask questions about the full extent of like what happened, or they took his side and said, yeah, that's true, she seems crazy, she seems so vengeful. And it's like, y'all, who goes to these lengths? The fact that this woman didn't even want to report what had happened shows you that she wasn't vengeful, even though I would have been. I mean, she does tell a story of like, of how Soon-Yi was on the phone with Woody, and so this is by this time everyone in the household already knows what's going on, right? So she walks in on Soon-Yi on the phone with Woody, and she hangs up the phone really quickly, and Mia hits her because she's so angry, and justifiably so. Like, what kind of madness? Like, who? The fact that Mia was so patient, and the fact that she said that she like loves her still, and like she still wanted her to be a part of the family, and she tried to help her and all this other stuff, I don't know, it just makes no sense to me how people bought into the narrative of her being crazy and vengeful so easily when none of the signs showed that. Like, I mean, for anyone who had the wherewithal or the patience to actually do the research, like none of that adds up. Like, the math just isn't mathing. Like, you can't tell me that this woman is crazy when she didn't even get upset at the affair. Like, she got mad, she didn't even try to like do anything about it. She was like, you know this is wrong, and he had no response to that, but she still wanted that child to be a part of her family, and she was still very willing to forgive her and be her mom. Like, the fact that this man married Soon-Yi a couple years after all of this investigation stuff died down, I'm like, did anyone even ask any I guess that's my confusion. It's like, did no one ask questions? Did no one say, this is weird? Like, Soon-Yi was like in college, we're assuming that the affair didn't start earlier. There's hints that it started when she was a minor, when she was in high school. But irregardless of whether she was old enough to consent, because the whole argument of consent needs to be reevaluated, and I talked about this in my army video, like, being a certain age, or even saying, or even participating in the act willingly, doesn't mean that you want everything to happen, though whatever is happening, to happen at that moment. Like, you can change your mind, and then at that moment you're not consenting to it. I don't even want to talk about it, because the way it stands right now, you can use that argument for anything, and it's like, it doesn't justify the bad behavior to me. But irregardless of that, he watched her grow up. Like, he was in the house with her as she was growing up, and he decided, I think this is the person who I'm gonna like want to spend the rest of my life with. But what was interesting in the documentary is that they talk about how he's been kind of planting these seeds in his movies for years. Him having relationships with very young women. And Manhattan, one of his biggest and most celebrated films depicts that same relationship. So I think in his mind, he doesn't think that anything is wrong with that, and he's been feeding that into his art this entire time. So by the time that he actually gets with Sumi and marries her, everyone's like, okay, I guess it's normal because this is what we've been seeing from him for so many years. She mentions it, Dylan mentions it in the documentary. She's like, that this stuff doesn't go away, like it's with you forever. And he wasn't charged with anything because they didn't want to put Dylan on the stand when she was like 7, because it's a very high profile case and it would have been long and exhausting and very traumatic for her. So they made the decision, not her parents, but the state police, because there were 2 investigations, one in Connecticut and one in New York. Something happened in New York where it was basically like a cover-up because he's from New York and people love him in New York, so they made it go away. And in Connecticut, they didn't want to put Dylan on the stand, so those charges were dropped. And because he wasn't convicted of anything, he basically got away scot-free, and people thought, okay, well, I guess he's innocent because he wasn't proven guilty. But I'm really angry about the fact that people just like glossed over this, and like they made it a big media thing at the time. They painted Mia in a horrible light. Their whole family was completely wrecked after this, by the way. Like, it was never the same. It was never a cohesive family after the trial and everything. You have a little girl who has to now grow up completely traumatized because of the sexual assault that she had to experience at the hand of her own father. And Woody just keeps going on, living his life as if nothing had happened. And people are still lining up to work with him. I mean, Emma Stone, Greta Gerwig, Javier Bardem, Scarlett Johansson, like everyone, people, Owen Wilson, Rachel McAdams, everyone just like conveniently just decided that this wasn't a big deal. And that makes me feel a thing. Should I really be surprised? No. But I feel like if everyone just decided that he was scum and left him alone, he would have no career, So the criticisms I've read from this documentary is that it's very one-sided. It's all about Mia's story and it's all about Dylan's story, and because Woody was not involved in this, it can't be like a fair, balanced retelling of events because he didn't have input, and he completely discredits the whole thing and thinks that it's all made up and lies. And I feel like that's for people who haven't seen the documentary, but I also feel like it's people who want to protect abusers and misogynistic people because they're famous and talented. Obviously Woody was not going to be involved in this, and I think the fact that they went to the lengths to get recorded phone calls where him and Mia were talking, and also excerpts from his book, his 2020 book, where he discusses his whole life, they include all of that. So you do hear his voice through all of it, and you also hear people who were fans of him and his work speaking about the impact that he had in film, in New York culture, like all that other stuff. So you are getting 2 sides of the story, even if it's not coming directly from his mouth. Like, even if he's not sitting down for an interview, they're bringing out archival footage of him on 60 Minutes and him doing other interviews. So they are bringing his perspective into the telling of the story. So obviously it's not one-sided because you are getting 2 perspectives. Whoever these people are who are writing these review pieces are blatantly not paying attention. Like, I feel like that you can't watch the docuseries and miss that. So I said this before, maybe not on this channel, but in my podcast, of just being like, we let talented men get away with anything. Like, if you're talented and you can bring something to the table, if you can bring money, then yeah, fine, we'll accept. We don't care what you do in your private life. You can do whatever you want as long as you're making good art. And we need to get over the fact that people are talented and see that they're doing some messed up, deplorable stuff, and we have to hold them accountable for that. because nobody else is going to do it. The Hollywood industry needs to take some accountability for the fact that this man has had a successful career. Like Midnight in Paris, Magic in the Moonlight, Blue Jasmine, like all of these movies that have come out, premiering at Cannes, getting Oscars, and I'm just like, y'all really sat there and let this man and him with no shame, no acknowledgement, no responsibility of what happened, continue to run roughshod all over all of y'all and make movies, and y'all were lining up to be a part of his films. Like, yikes. What's the movie? A Rainy Day in New York with Selena Gomez and Timothée Chalamet, for it to not come out in America. Like, it did not premiere in any theaters here. It premiered overseas. But it took that and the Time's Up and Me Too movements for him to really be like, shut out. The idea that he made all these amazing movies for women specifically is, I don't know, like just weird. Because maybe the roles were great, but like also he was doing all this mess in his private life. And his life is reflected in the films because he's the writer of the films. So I can't say that it's not like he was championing women or anything, because he wasn't. Not really. Not truly. And that's something that they're gonna all have to reckon with. A lot of people have come out and apologized and said they recant and don't believe those things anymore. And obviously they believe the victims and whatever, but it's sad. It's sad that that was the case and that was allowed to happen. But society changes, so I guess people wake up and they think, okay, well, yeah, that didn't make any sense and I shouldn't have done that. For people who are huge fans of him, and they like had to grapple with whether they could watch his movies anymore because of everything that happened, and how do you separate the artist from the art? And I don't think that you can anymore. I think that they are synonymous, especially if their work is very personal. You can't distinguish the two, and you don't have to pretend like these people don't exist. However, you do have a responsibility, I guess, to decide whether or not you're going to continue supporting what they do. And that's the thing that we've all had to come to terms with in recent years, when we found out that a lot of talented people are messed up. So, there's that part of it. And I think that he represents this toxic masculinity that we are starting to understand. Like if you watch You or some of those other movies where it's like the nice guy, but it's really just a guy who's entitled and feels like he can take whatever he wants, and if you don't give it to him, then he's gonna throw a tantrum and then make your life hell and then pretend like he had nothing to do with it. Like, that's who Woody Allen is. Like, he's not beating his wife, but he's being manipulative and controlling and lying and abusive and horrible. So I just hope that he never works a day in his life again. Like, I hope he never gets a job again. Like, I hope that he has to sit with everything that he did for the rest of his life until he dies. That's my hope for him, because you can't just like ruin people's lives and then get away with it. I don't think that ever works. Somehow, some way, it always comes back, and you get justice. You get what's coming to you eventually. And I think that his day is up. I hope that Dylan has peace now, and that she can start to heal from this now that the story's out there, and it's out there in the way that it needs to be told. A lot of people watched this documentary, had feelings about it, so at least now it's out there and people know the full extent of what happened. It was well presented, and I feel like if you go in there without any previous judgments, you can understand things for how they are and then make your own opinion. And if you still support Woody after that, then I don't know, I would see a therapist. I think you should, phone a counselor, because yeah. But yeah, that's it from me. Thanks for listening to me rant. I had so many feelings about this. It was a great docuseries. Watch it and form your own opinions, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.